I'm Bob Porter. I'm director of the Brandenburg organisation, and we're looking tonight particularly from the perspective of the Brandenburg Camino, which is our lockdown keep us sane project. Matt, on my screen is top left-hand corner. Matt Buswell is still muted, and Matt is a professional singer. So Matt and I work together in the coaching and the planning, and we have perhaps
Thank you.
similar tastes, but I like to think complementary skills. And to my right, as I look on the screen, there's Callum Fraser, who is here to talk to us about his choir and his conducting. Callum, good evening.
Good evening.
This is a great treat. It's lovely. I invented this purely so I could pick everyone's brains and get all their best ideas, and it's working marvelously. So, Callum, tell us about your choir that's here at the moment, and you do more than one thing, don't you?
I do indeed. Well, much like many people in our industry, Bob, it's a bit of a portfolio career, but the majority of faces I know on the screen this evening are from Streatham Choral. I first got to know Bob a couple of years ago now, I think, but Streatham Choral performed most enjoyable concert with the Brandenburg Sinfonia about 18 months ago. Program of Mozart in St. Peter's Church in Streatham, which was great fun, and I'm sure many of you on the screen remember that fondly. Sadly, lockdown came along, and we weren't able to perform our second concert with the Brandenburgs, which was meant to be Handel's Messiah in the middle of April in the Cadogan Hall with the Brandenburg Sinfonia. So we've postponed that till next year, and we're all keeping our fingers crossed from both sides. I know that much, but that was a great shame for all of us. But we've kept our spirits high. So the summer term, we did a sort of online offering. We did some musical academic sort of evenings. So I did an analysis of Bach's St. John Passion via Zoom with some recordings, and everyone had the score sent via PDF and all that sort of stuff. I did a Desert Island Discs, which a committee member interviewed me for. We did a couple of sectional rehearsals, which were amusing when everyone turned mute off, and then we've done a couple of social online social things in the summer term as well. Since we started up in September, we have been able to meet in person, which has been absolutely great. The church where we rehearse, St. Leonard's Church in Streatham, has got a very rigorous and secure risk assessment, and we've been able to buy fully into that. And I think I speak for everyone who's come along, and when I say I feel very safe there, and the committee's done a fantastic job in terms of putting on a lecture series since the beginning of September, where people have been learning about different aspects of music, different pieces, all socially distanced and all that sort of thing. So I've been talking about Mendelssohn's Elijah. I did a history of Western music. We had a guest in for another Desert Island Discs evening, the Beginner's Guide to Music Theory. The last week we did the Guide to Vocal Anatomy, and some kind of camera down the throat kind of stuff, but a bit of a variety, which I think and I hope people have found quite interesting. But without a doubt, people do miss the singing, and I'm delighted that unless anything changes, this coming week we are going to be starting singing in smaller groups for 45 minutes at a time every Monday evening, just singing some Christmas carols, not even to rehearse, but just to have a bit of a sing together. So the committee's been fantastic in sending out online polls and things to see exactly where people are feeling with regards to the current situation and what they're comfortable with. But the vast majority of the choir are keen to come along and to sing in a very sanitized, socially distanced manner. And so in small groups, we're going to be starting that on Monday in two separate choirs, as it were, for 45 minutes at a time, wiping down chairs in between and all of that sort of thing. But it's a bit early for Christmas carols, but I think we deserve it this year of all years. So Bob, in answer to your question, that's what we've been doing with Streatham Choral, and onwards and upwards. I think we've hit rock bottom, and then we're growing again. It's been a great shame for the choir because numbers were just building. We had this really exciting concert, and this year is actually our centenary year. It's far from ideal, but we're a positive bunch and we're making the most of it.
Excellent. And your other activities? Well, you must have a church somewhere lurking around.
Well, in your life. Yes. Well, I do have a church. My heart sank about an hour ago when I got my BBC notification, as I'm the director of choral music at the University of Nottingham, which has just been put into Tier 3. Oh. So that's somewhat frustrating. However, the university COVID rates are plummeting now post Freshers Week, which is excellent. And I'm hoping to be back up there for the first time in only a couple of weeks, as education is in a slightly different legal bracket. So we really hope to be able to do something with the students, probably not a performance at this stage, but we have quite large rehearsal spaces. So though the university choirs had to be cancelled, certainly until Christmas, we hope that the chamber choir and things like that can carry on. But the rule at the university at the moment is only professionally directed ensembles. So none of the societies can be happening, which is a great shame, because I remember when I was at university, part of the thrill of it was the students getting together as undergrads and making it all happen themselves. And actually, it looks like this year that won't be possible for them. So it is a shame. With regards to church work, yeah, I'm also the director of music at St. Leonard's Church, where the choral society rehearse. And so when lockdown hit there, we acted quite quickly. We've got a fantastic rector who put together some fantastic online services. And there's lots of talent in the congregation in terms of some tech ability, shall we say. But my fiance and I were giving the choristers individual half-hour weekly lessons. So there's about 20 of them. So we were doing that to try and keep the energy going there. And we were giving the odd lesson to the adult choir as well. I didn't try to do online rehearsals with the adult choir. I thought that would be somewhat futile. But I'm delighted that since about mid-August, whenever it was, we've been able to rehearse and sing at services. It is a small choir, between 15 and 20, and we've got enough space in the church just socially distanced behind the altar. And so that's good news. We're having to pull longer shifts because the church, in a rather nice way, is quite full on a Sunday morning. We have to do 2 Sunday morning Eucharists, 9:30 and 11:15, which means more work for myself and others, but actually it means everyone who wants can come along, and there is music at these services. And then Evensong's great. We've changed Evensong to be a bit shorter and a bit more music heavy, because we're aware that a lot of people are missing live music, and it's been great to see so many of the Streatham Choral Society coming along to listen to Evensong and enjoy what that brings. Yes, and so it's an interesting time. We're currently trying to plan Christmas and Advent and all that sort of stuff. But I think you've got to view the opportunities as well as the negatives, actually, and try and create things out of what possibly wasn't there before.
Great. Well, it sounds like your business is booming over there.
I've been very fortunate on a personal level. I am employed by some very good people, and I include Streatham Choral amongst them. They've been very good to me. But it's not been easy on our industry, and I'm very aware of that. But Streatham are a resilient bunch, and actually we've just had the Streatham Festival, and there's been lots of great art going around, and it's been done in a slightly different manner from usual. But lots of our members are actively involved in that, in musical and other settings, and it's always well supported by our members. And so that's been absolutely great. Yes.
Great. Well, I think we sit at maybe the opposite end of the spectrum. The way we evolved was that back in March, I had COVID pretty seriously and was really knocked sideways. And Matt, who's an old friend and colleague, kept on ringing me up and saying, "How are you? You know, how are you doing?" And I had a really rotten time. Even when I got over it, I was sleeping for 9 hours a night and having a 2-hour nap in the afternoon, which sounds like you're in a bath chair. You know, so it was just awful. But getting through that, and eventually Matt kept on ringing up and said, well, "Listen, why don't we do an online project? Let's do an online project." And I looked at some of these things that were going on, and I thought it was pretty ropey and pretty dispiriting, and so I was not interested at all. And then eventually he bullied me into getting something going, and we planned this pilgrimage. It's a musical pilgrimage with various steps along the way.
And so at what point did you start that? You say that you had COVID and you were unsure at first, because I felt the same thing. You saw immediately a lot of online things, and then everyone needed to make their decision, didn't they, whether to kind of get on board that train or not?
Well, I think people made the I've seen this in a number of other industries, that people have made a bad decision by thinking, that's what we did, let's just stick that online and we'll be online. And that's just doesn't work. So the majority of the projects that were going at the start were that I would send you a honky tonk piano accompaniment to the Mozart Requiem. You would sing the tenor part into your iPhone. You would then listen to it and you'd be appalled by what you heard. Then you'd send it to me, and the techie guys would fiddle around with it, and it would all come out lovely. And I'd send it back to you. You'd look at it on your iPhone, and that'd be the end of the story. And it's not music as we knew it, but it's also missing out all the extra things that go with being in a choir like Streatham. I mean, it is turning up on a Monday evening and sitting next to the same person and talking about your grandchildren, or and going to the pub afterwards and so on. So we thought, if we cut, we'll get as far as we can with the musical side, but that's only not the be all and end all. We stick all the other bits all around it. So we do some things as you've described that you've been doing in a very similar way. So we have analysis sessions. Matt does one-to-one vocal workshops with quite a lot of people in the group. We have interviews like this. We have sectionals, full rehearsals, obviously. We have a quiz. We have a wine bar. So,
have you? Two questions, Bob. Number one, have you ever won the quiz?
Nobody wins. That's the beauty of it.
Right. And tell us a bit more about the wine bar. I'm sure Streatham Choral will be very curious to hear a bit more about that.
Well, I think if you could simultaneously do what I'm doing, we'll just show you how the wine bar works. Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
So, the way it's trying to get one of those extra bits involved. So it's social. Our guys get a bit fed up with listening to Matt and I bang on about what we want, the particular intonation of that note or the Germanic pronunciation, and with so the wine bar is a social event, and there's usually a couple every week, and they're Zoom, and so therefore it's limited to 8 guests, because then you can be unmuted, and they're hosted by one of the members of the gang, one of the pilgrims. So Matt and I often drop in, but it's not centrically driven. It's driven for the people, of the people, whatever, etc., etc. And it means that it's just like dropping into a bar and meeting some people who are very similar to you, and sitting down and chatting, except you're at home and it's a bring your own, so it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, it sounds good fun. We did the something rather similar, which was a murder mystery night, and with 2 separate breakout rooms, and some people dressed up. It was good fun, actually. I got it all wrong personally. I accused the wrong person, but you're absolutely right in saying it's as much about the social side of things as anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's it. At the centre of it, there is a piece of music. We're now on our 4th step. We have a 4-week step and then a week off, and so on and so on, as the pilgrimage. And the current step is looking at the Wie lieblich movement from the Brahms Requiem that I mentioned to you before. And so here I am. I'm going to say, if you were approaching this, what would your thoughts be? Is it with joy, horror? Where are the icebergs? Where what are the traps? What are the glorious bits?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I mentioned earlier that this was meant to be our centenary season, and the committee hadn't met formally to discuss repertoire before February. But actually, in my mind, this was going to be our concert for this term, the autumn term in our centenary season, the Brahms Requiem. And I've only conducted it once, and it was in Brahms's own 2-piano, 4 hands, 1 piano version. And that's what we were going to be doing before possibly engaging yourselves once again in the spring term. But indeed. I mean, the Brahms Requiem, I think, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a 7-movement piece. It lasts a little over an hour. And it's quite unusual for a requiem, because it's not got the traditional Latin text. It's in German. It's the Lutheran Bible. And it's a requiem for the living in many ways. I've written it down here. The very first line, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." So it's those that mourn rather than those who have died. And so even just performing Wie lieblich, the middle movement number 4 that you're working on, I would be looking at it from a more macro sort of point of view. And actually it's what one needs to bring to the piece as a whole. And it's this slightly more positive, uplifting sort of quality. And remind me, Bob, are you doing it in English or German?
German.
In German.
Which is a challenge.
Yes, I mean, the German's hard. I've got the score just in front of me here. I mean, it really is. It is really tricky. I mean, it starts quietly. The sopranos are floating these high notes, and then tenors by themselves. Any kind of solo tenor line. I don't know any choir in the land whose tenor section is not the smallest section. Oh, I'm wrong.
I have to say, we have a very strong tenor section numerically and qualitatively as well. I think it is the 3rd smallest section, but only by a fraction behind the sopranos.
There we go.
And we did Janja's Day from the Fauré Requiem as a previous step. So there's lots of exposed lovely tenor lines in that.
Absolutely. I mean, the beauty.
Ricky's nodding sagely. I think we got away with it.
Excellent. And the beauty of German is, in many ways, compared to other languages, what you see is what you get. It all makes sense, actually, which is a great thing. And I was so looking forward to working on this piece with this choir, and hopefully in years to come we will do it. But Bob, I wonder if I might share my screen and play a 30-second chunk or something. Would that be possible?
You could, or even better, I could play you a little bit because I've got it lined up.
Oh,
because
what?
Because this is all remote. People, we can't teach people how it goes. They have to teach themselves.
Yes,
and therefore it's our duty to give them really strong resources that they can use to work on at home. So if I get the Share screen. So what I'm going to play to you is one of our there. Can you see that?
We can, yep.
Great, and give me a shout once I start playing if you can hear it. So this is 4 MIDI voices, MIDI piano, and a solo soprano on the top. So this is the track the sopranos would get to work with, and they as it's on a recording, they can just go back and repeat phrase by phrase and learn it in the same way that a choir accompanist would go through. So you'll also hear a click because that's the coordination of the timing. Is that enough? Was there a particular bit you wanted, or is that enough, or you have some
Keep
more?
on going to the. Have you got that tenor bit? I'm sure we'd all love to hear that.
Oh well, this is only MIDI because this track is the soprano's learning track.
Of course it is. Yeah,
so it's not going to be quite as beautiful.
Can you play us the tenor track?
Yes, I could. So I'll have to stop that and then.
Whilst you're doing that, Bob, I wonder if you could tell us what assistance do you give your singers with the language, because that's obviously
Matt. Well, Matt, I think Matt is the expert. So maybe Matt, could you dive in on that?
Absolutely. So, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
A couple of things. We always provide an audio track of the language. Sorry, I'm a little dark here. Whether that's myself or a version that we've commissioned someone else to do, but for the Brahms specifically, I asked my colleague Christian, who's an opera singer that I've worked with a few times, who is a native German. So he was able to record the track. So he speaks it incredibly slowly, and then repeats it so that you can join in with him slowly, and then repeats it in a more speech-like speed. And then we've encouraged our pilgrims to work with the language away from the notes, because it's super tempting on day one to jump in straight away singing the German.
Course,
but if you can, and then for those that some of our pilgrims are this way minded, we also provide the IPA, so the International Phonetic Alphabet, because some of our pilgrims use that as a way of learning the vowel sounds and the consonants. And then with the addition of the Royal Holloway singers, they've had that in their ears as well, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope this will be the tenor. Can you see?
Yeah, we can see that.
Fine. Let's see.
This is your moment, tenors. Lovely. It's so nice to hear how other people go about teaching things from a distance, because we were all absolute novices back in March, weren't we?
Totally. Yeah. So I mean, the other aspect that I think I could share is that we cheat.
I
There
don't
are
care, Bob.
there are lots of disadvantages of doing it like this. So you have to take advantage of the advantages. If it makes any sense. So, for example, we have on the very long phrase we have pre-planned staggers with individually labelled moments to breathe. So that doesn't show up in the audio track. In when we did the Fora Requiem in the middle section of the Agnus Dei, that's that section, the section where everyone's singing chromatically downwards. And most people who sing in choirs know exactly what that means. It was the danger sign, it's going to go flat. And so, as well as having the organ and the MIDI choir in their ears when they are singing, they also had a piano picking out the first note of each bar. So, absolutely, the intonation is fantastic. So things like that, and
yes,
in the piano, so the way that it works for us is that we put the piano, the real piano, in last. So the pianist will be accompanying the product that we've created. Now, this is difficult in COVID because you've got to have two people playing on the same piano, which is not very distant. So we actually have a mate of Matt's, who's a fantastic pianist, Ian Tyndale.
Oh, I know Ian. Yeah.
Well, Ian is playing both parts. Because I figured that if you're relying on someone's instinct to know exactly where to play with a percussive instrument like the piano, to exactly where to play, then the person who's going to have the closest instincts to that person is himself.
Yes, yeah.
And so he's going to record both, and we'll stick it all together.
Just for anyone, particularly anyone in Streatham Choral, querying about piano reductions and things like that. The reason I personally love this one is that Brahms wrote it himself. It's for four hands and actually completely rethought the whole thing a year or two after the orchestral requiem was written. And it's not just someone coming along after the event and simplifying it for the piano. It's quite different, and the colors and textures that Brahms gets from the four hands at the one piano are different from the orchestral colors, but really enhance the requiem in different ways. I think it's a fantastic way of doing it, and in a practical way, if you've got a smaller venue or a smaller budget or whatever it might be, it's a very good way of doing it, because it is a big orchestra. The orchestration is massive.
I have to say that we, as an orchestra, we performed it a few times with amateur choirs, and it's often been a disaster because all you hear is a wall of orchestral sound, and you see some people out the back mouthing as if they're singing. On one particular occasion, we played it in Thaxted, and it was a very busy day because choirs often want to put concerts on the same day. And some of those days they
want it at the end of term.
Yes, there are occasionally more than one version of the Brandenburg Sinfonia playing in different places. And on this particular occasion, I had vehement complaints about the orchestra because it was too loud and the playing was appalling and it was shocking. And when I pointed out that the entire wind section was the wind section for the Philharmonia Orchestra because they had a day off, and they were playing as softly as they dared, but it's just so heavily scored that I've never ever heard it sung well, apart from like a big proms choir or something.
And when it's done at the proms, it's usually 2 or 3 symphonic choruses together.
Exactly.
About 300 voices. I mean, it's a completely different beast, isn't it?
Yeah, like a super tanker. You're not going to change course all of a sudden, are you?
No, absolutely. And so, Bob, your choral pilgrimage is called Camino.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, El Camino. I've lived in Spain for a certain amount of time. I taught in Barcelona for a long time, and so I'm very much involved in Hispanic life. there is a pilgrimage along the north of Spain through Galicia to Santiago de Compostela, which is Santiago, St. James, Santiago, where his relics are meant to be. And there is a pilgrimage that starts in France that people walk along the path to get there. And the whole idea, when Matt and I were thinking about the concept, it seems that just doing one online recording with all the cheats and all the lack of interactive music is pretty uninspiring. But the journey alongside it or to it might be more interesting. In the same way that you could go to Santiago tomorrow by plane and fly there and get there. Now you've got there. So what? It's the journey that is the important part, and what you learn along the journey. In fact, we've got 3 of our pilgrims who have actually done the pilgrimage along the Camino. Camino means path or walkway or street in Spanish. And so we're going to have a session with them talking about their experiences. So that's the derivation of it.
Very good. And would you say it's been a success, in your opinion?
In front of some of the very distinguished singers here, I would hesitate. But if you put a knife against my throat, I'd say yes. I think it's been it's been a success for me, because I went from lounging around doing nothing and not feeling like doing anything, having no energy. Matt, I, and our marketing guy, Mark, we went from the day when I rang Matt back and said, look, I've got this really great idea. We're going to do it like this. 8 days later, we launched the whole project. And I worked 12-hour days, and it was the enthusiasm and the inspiration that completely rejuvenated me personally. Music, as a project, I think it's great. I think the moment that I figured that this is going in the right direction of creating a community is that we'd had a rehearsal a bit like this, and one of the ladies was knitting. And so in the break, someone said, "Oh, what are you knitting, Ruth?" She said, "Oh, I'm knitting a jumper for my cousin." And then, I don't know, we're one of our, I think it was the quiz or something like that, a social event, and everyone was off mute. And someone said, Ruth, have you finished your jumper? and they started a conversation. There is now a knitting Facebook group within the Camino.
Very good.
That's the sort of, I mean, not
for me. It's a success when there's a knitting Facebook group.
Yeah, there's the definition. I think that's just, I'm not interested, but it's a community, and it's been really amazing bunch of people.
It's great. I mean, I'm sure everyone in the performing arts will tell a different story, but I was chatting to a friend fairly recently who's a freelance French horn player on the London circuit, and he said when lockdown first hit, he decided to just put his feet up, take a bit of a break. And then in the last few months, he's got back into it, and he says he feels in a really great place about it. He says his colleagues who chose to absolutely hammer into the practice on day one have been completely physically and mentally burnt out by the whole thing, practicing with nowhere to perform. And actually, they're the ones that have almost damaged themselves more, whereas the people that have chosen to just give themselves a bit of time have benefited. And this is just his opinion. I'm sure everyone would speak differently, but it was interesting for me to hear that, actually.
Yeah, I think all happened so quickly that everyone is in a different situation, and time was sort of frozen at that point. And the musicians who do proportionally a large amount of teaching have fared better.
Yes, yeah.
And musicians who didn't have time to do any teaching because they were so busy have absolutely fallen flat on their face.
Yes.
Work-wise, it's been pretty tough, and I know of some international jet set trumpet soloist who's delivering for Deliveroo or something like that.
Yeah,
just to get by. Look, I'm watching the clock. If people haven't eaten yet, there might well be tummy rumblings. So I'm just gonna say, I wonder if the three of us could put our necks on the block and ask if anybody has any questions for any of the three of us.
Bob, can I ask you one question before everyone else starts?
Please.
Have you become zoomed out over the last 6 months?
Yes, no, and yes, and no. I personally, my experience and observations have been that to begin with, everyone was amazed by it. It's fantastic. And then a lot of people got zoomed out. And now I see a lot of people adapting to it and it becoming part of the new norm. And the parallel I see life and music going ahead in a very mixed combination. And the parallel I would draw is that for a lot of older people, 20 years ago, they all wrote letters and would not have dreamt of touching anything called email. And that life has changed completely. And emails have become totally the norm for a large number of people. I think this is just another development along that path. So I think it's a shame because it does have some social value, and we're interacting with I'm enjoying your company, and I hope that vice versa. But it's a limited version of that. So I see society going forwards as being a lot of local things happening. I'm having a ball. I moved to Brighton 2 years ago, and I'm having a fantastic time locally because it's all close. And then the bigger sort of expanse, the bigger distances. Why would I drive to Leeds to have a half an hour chat with somebody ever?
Yeah.
So I think we are I think we're becoming more accustomed to it. We're finding ways of getting around the limitations, and I think it's going to be with us for some. I think we'll be with us forever.
I would agree with all of that. I think, yeah.